Throughout history, there has only ever been two constants. 1. Everything will eventually die. And 2. Nintendo will do everything in its power to ensure it's the cause of that death. It stems from a problem Nintendo and gamers have faced alike for generations, and that, of course, is the dreaded emulation. Ever since Nintendo has been making games, people, or rather gamers, have urged to play those games in any context but the original console. And of course, there's many reasons someone would choose to play like this over the traditional ways. Maybe the console games are crazy overpriced on reselling marketplaces. Or maybe you never had the option to buy either even if you wanted. Or maybe you're dumping all of your own games onto a more powerful computer so you can play these games the way God intended. 4K 60 FPS with high contrast and oversaturated graphics. No matter the context, we all look alike in Nintendo's eyes. We are dirty, seafaring, nautical nincompoops. YouTube advertisers aren't a fan of the other word. So hop onto the ship and allow me to guide us through the waving rapids of legal mumbo-jumbo, and sail the bow of moral quandaries into Solution Harbor, as we learn why Nintendo has a crab up their leg, and how to fix it once and for all. And believe it or not, boats do somehow manage to creep into this conversation once more in a way completely unrelated to pirates. So let us go forth into uncharted waters. Nintendo has always been known for copyright aversion, and just despising those nautical nincompoops. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was near impossible for any random Randy to hook up an NES cartridge into their computer and fax his copy of Super Mario Bros. 3 to all his friends. No, during this time, you had to be dedicated to pirate. The NES and Super NES both had little locking chips in the cartridge and console to ensure a product's legitimacy. This was primarily there to prevent different publishers from circumventing Nintendo and producing their own cartridges. Notably, this was seen with Sega during the Sega v Accolade trial, when Accolade did just that. Long story short, it was a confusing trial that eventually led to a precedent where reverse engineering of specific console functions falls under fair use. Next, I want to point out the most notable and possibly dumbest anti-piracy measure Nintendo has ever done, which is GameCube discs. GameCube discs are some of the silliest little devices out there. During the 6th generation of consoles, everyone was begging Nintendo to use discs rather than cartridges due to sustaining larger file sizes and cheaper production. This was Sony's 2nd generation with discs. Microsoft was stepping in with their console running on discs, and even Sega joined in with the Dreamcast. There should be no reason for Nintendo to not join as well. Except, of course, Nintendo did the Nintendo thing. They used discs, it had larger file sizes than an N64 cartridge, and it also had severe growth deformities. Nintendo returns once again to, by any means necessary, stop the pirates, even if it kills their own console. Throughout all these generations, there has always been methods to rip your games onto your computer, but up until this point, I wouldn't say it was ever accessible to the masses. But at last, we have the Wii. The Wii became a dream machine for anyone seeking to play Super Paper Mario on anything but a Wii. With the coming of Homebrew and various ripping programs that I won't teach you how to use, it became easier than ever to save and back up your own games. Even share your games with friends online, and whoa there, buckaroo. That's what we in the industry call no bueno. You can't do that. You're infringing on Nintendo's intellectual property, and that's a sin. Earlier, I mentioned the 3 reasons why people would emulate. The game or console are overpriced by resellers, neither are available to purchase, or for enhanced performance. Each of these are good and all, but I happen to skip over the most notorious use of emulation: piracy. There's arguments that all of the above count as piracy, but especially with the surprising ease of Switch and Wii U emulation during the console lifespans, there's gonna be thousands of people who opt to spend the 60 minutes trying to figure out how to get the game on their computer over the $60 to buy it. It's a problem in every industry, and even with my bounds of endless knowledge, I can't say I have a solution for that. You wouldn't download a sandwich. Well, yeah, I think everyone would if they could. But when a game is still easily purchasable, I don't think I could ever say it's morally fair. But what if it's not easily purchasable? What if, let's say, Nintendo shut off the only stream where you can legally buy a game, and have all that money go directly into Nintendo and the developers' pockets? How about then? Well, if we ask Nintendo, that's piracy. Wahoo! No. Nintendo likes their software on their platforms, and even if they close off every way to give them money for their games, like with the Wii U and 3DS eShops, they're still not going to be happy when you open WarioWare Gold on, dear God, anything but a 3DS. Or even when you do open it on a 3DS, but maybe the game came from a more than questionable source. I will state that this video is in no way a defense of piracy. I mean, I've done my fair share of seafaring, but especially if you have the money to do so and the means to legally obtain a game, you should. But this video is absolutely not a defense of Nintendo, because as I'll discuss heavily later, if you just let me buy LEGO Indiana Jones 2 The Adventure Continues for the Wii, everything would be right in the world. The main problem with the whole existence of emulation is copyright law and DMCA. For the following section, I've done my fair share of research, but I don't have a law degree and I read at a 3rd grade level. So while I wholly believe my information is accurate, give it a few grains of salt. And since I'm American and most of my audience is American, I'm sticking to American law. And although it tends to be very similar throughout the world, not everything will sync up. Copyright and DMCA laws are incredibly important. I hope that's not a problem here. If you make something, you should be allowed to profit from it. However, thanks to a certain little mouse, copyright laws have become extensively more prohibitive. When the first US copyright laws came about in 1790, it ensured up to 28 years of copyright for any creation. Back then, the main purpose of copyright was for books, maps, and anything printed, since at the time, you couldn't quite record and resell a Beethoven concert. By 1909, it extended up to 56 years total for any published works. 70 years after that, we got the Copyright Act of 1976, and this gave an author life plus 50 years for any publications, and corporations 75 years of copyright. I think this is the point where copyright law should have ended. I would argue life plus 50 years was too much. I think stopping at life would have been fine. And when your family isn't living off 150-year-old royalties, it leads to more people creating more art, which is only a good thing. And for corporations, well, 75 years is a lot. Given this was still the law we went by, Winnie the Pooh would have only gone into the public domain in 2001. Think of what the world could be like if we had another 20 years to make C-tier Winnie the Pooh and Friends horror movies. And think of what that world would be if we had even longer. There isn't a better reality than that one. However, we don't live in that reality because in 1998, Congress extended copyright to life plus 70 years for individuals and 95 years for corporations. You see, in 2003, there was another famous legacy character set to go in the public domain. Everyone's favorite billionaire overlord, Mickey Mouse. Or Steamboat Willie, since Mickey's most notable characteristics wouldn't go into the public domain for a few more years after that. But thanks to lobbying, which is just great, Mickey was given an extra 20 years alongside any other property. If we kept the 1976 law, the game Pong would enter the public domain in 2047, and Super Mario Bros. In 2060. Now, well, you'd be lucky enough if you saw an elderly me finally playing a legal ROM hack of Mario. So, what does this all have to do with emulation? Emulation becomes legally gray due to copyright and DMCA specifically. If there were no copyright protections at all, anyone could go into Internet Archive and download whatever game they choose. DMCA laws prohibit the action itself of copying the games and consoles, and that especially becomes a problem for the emulators. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, takes what we discussed from copyright and brings it into the internet. Alongside general copyright protection, it also prevents circumventing or reverse engineering any given system. This helps prevent people from, let's say, hacking into their car entertainment system to play Shrek, or enabling the $2,000 seat warmers that are already built into the car, or self-diagnosing your ice cream machine, or making printer cartridges. There do, however, exist certain provisions to protect some rights in relation to DMCA. For example, Title II, the Online Copyright Infringement Liability Limitation Act, which protects internet and online service providers from DMCA claims when they aren't expressly at fault. For example, when you download The Incredible Hulk starring Edward Norton from a questionable website, Xfinity won't be held liable. And when you upload that movie to YouTube, they won't be held liable either. Then we have Title V for DMCA provisions, which is the Vessel Hull Design Protection Act. This act ensures protection for boat hull designs. If I'm being honest, this has nothing to do with the video or topic at hand, besides the whole piracy in boats thing. I stumbled upon it while researching and just thought it was really funny. Going on. Now, fortunately, these title provisions aren't the only thing that exists for DMCA law. Every 3 years, there exists a period where people can apply for specific things to be exempt from DMCA law. For example, there has been exemptions made to allow vehicle diagnosis and repair, alongside various other electronics. And for the next period to submit proposals, as you may have seen already, iFixit will submit an exemption for the right to diagnose and repair McDonald's ice cream machines. Maybe they'll finally start working. Currently, and in the past, we've had exemptions made that are especially notable, but two most of all. In 2006, we got the following exemption: computer programs and video games distributed in formats that have become obsolete and which require the original media or hardware as a condition of access. And in 2018, we got this: video games in the form of computer programs embodied in physical or downloaded formats that have been lawfully acquired as complete games that are no longer reasonably available in the commercial marketplace, solely for the purpose of preservation of the game in a playable form by an eligible library, archive, or museum. Formats that have become obsolete. Reasonably available in the commercial marketplace. As we have the DMCA exemption currently, the latter only applies to archives and museums for the purpose of preservation. But how about when we want to play the games? There's a good chance you're out of luck. Which brings me, at last, to the final solution. No, definitely not that. The solution. I'll work on it. Up to now, we've established that emulation is necessary to provide access for games no longer sold, or for games overpriced by third parties. When the best way to buy Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door is either spending $100 on eBay or scavenging every retro game store in an attempt to find a cheaper copy, why wouldn't you just pirate instead? Nowadays, even a Chromebook can run your average emulator. I've come to believe the main problem with emulation is availability. Every company is guilty of this, and that becomes the real issue. Right now, there is no official way to buy and play any games from the GameCube to the Wii U generation outside of ports and remasters. Same for the DS and 3DS. Honestly, most of those games will probably rot on those systems. And we might even include Xbox 360 and PS3 here, if it weren't for the fact that most of those games are still accessible through current day console storefronts. You might wonder why, although there weren't as many people upset about the Xbox 360 shutdown as the 3DS and Wii U eShop shutdowns. Is it just that Nintendo fans are more hysterical when Nintendo games are in jeopardy? Yes, but it's also because all the games from the 360 store will still be available on the Xbox Series consoles. Sure, they're demoting the Xbox 360 to the role of brick, at least you can still buy 3D Ultra Mini Golf Adventures. So it becomes pretty clear what we, and the industry, and the world as a whole needs. An Online Content Availability Act. There needs to always be a way for the consumers to access your product. If not, screw public domain, screw DMCA. If you make something intended for the public, yet don't release it to the public, then I don't believe your copyright protection should matter. There's additional requirements I will add to this, but the main point is that if you don't provide the means to access something at a reasonable price in the commercial marketplace, it should be released from the DMCA protecting the ROM, and maybe even released to the public domain. Additionally, I have a problem with game licenses. When you buy a digital game, the storefront holds the right to revoke your license to the game at any point. Furthermore, if they shut down the store entirely, there's nothing forcing them to keep your purchases available to you. This is a massive problem for everyone. As we enter this new age of digital-only gaming, we also enter the age where nobody actually owns anything. At some point, Microsoft might just shut down the Xbox Store because Game Pass is all they need. And while it's unlikely they'd remove access to the games you bought, you can't expect them to keep their service up forever. So what about when they do delete everything? Well, if that happened to me, I'd hop on a boat and sail the 7 seas. I'm not going to let hundreds of dollars worth of games disappear and just accept it. But what about when all those games are on Game Pass? Sure, but that's adding another layer of removal from actual ownership. It needs to be made so that digital purchases are treated the same as physical purchases, where a company can't just revoke your access at any moment. I also believe game streaming needs to be separate from the Content Availability Act, since monthly streaming services, by definition, don't count as ownership. This includes Nintendo Switch Online. Under my suggestion, given Nintendo operates the same as they do now, every single game that they've made that is not on the Nintendo Switch eShop, including every NES, SNES, Game Boy, and N64 game on NSO, would be free reign to install and emulate. I hope pointing that out shows how much Nintendo content is impossible to pay Nintendo to permanently access. While much of that is available on NSO, and for a retro game subscription service, which is exactly what NSO is with online as a bonus, it's not that bad. But it's not ownership. If Nintendo had NSO and a virtual console, it would allow both ownership and subscription service models. And it's not like they can't coexist. After all, look at the Xbox. Every game on Game Pass is still purchasable by itself. Now, how about limited edition games like 3D Mario All-Stars? It seems with these laws, those couldn't exist at all. Oh well. Emulation goes back to the Stone Age, when man decided he wanted to play Cave Stickman on the Rock Portable. The entertainment industry as a whole needs laws encouraging them to make their products available for a one-time purchase that should last a lifetime. And if they don't opt to do so, it should become a public asset. What's the point in having games if we can't buy them? This won't solve the issue of piracy as a whole, since that whittles down to people either too stubborn or too broke to pay for anything. But on emulation as a whole, if you just allow me to purchase your games for a reasonable price, i.e. not $60, I'm game. Now, when it comes to playing those games on a system more powerful than, say, the Switch, I don't know. Let's just make another law that says it has to be playable on decentralized hardware after a number of years. I don't know. My hope for any potential laws like this is to discourage Nintendo from killing services like the Wii U and 3DS eShops and encourage them to carry over libraries from console to console. But what if you're in the case of a device being stolen? All the purchasable media from that console should easily transfer to any other system. This is the case currently with Nintendo, but I feel I should bring it up since my own Switch was stolen a few days ago. Nothing else, not my games, not my extra controllers, not my Steam Deck, or my Quest, or my Scott the Wiz Edition Clue. They didn't even take a few oatmeal cream pies to go. Just the Switch. The thing second most vital for me to do this channel. So, yeah, that's how my week's going. But I hope your week's doing fine. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know by liking and subscribing. Remember to do your laundry, and as always, keep cool. Bye!